My mother saw me suffering with a very high temperature, and she said, I have to take Eva, and perhaps we can get some medication. You know, we were rather new there, we didn't quite know what might happen. And then a miracle happened. My mother took me to this hospital, and she goes in, and a woman stands there, and my mother's mouth falls open, and she falls into her arm and says, Minnie, Minnie. That was a cousin of my mother and her best friend, Minnie. I'm called Eva Minnie after her, who had been transported. She lived in Czechoslovakia, has been transported from Tennessee, another camp, with her husband. And her husband was a skin specialist. Even the Germans had a lot of skin illnesses, and so he treated the Germans, and so he had as well to do with Mengele, and he had told him his wife is in Auschwitz, and so he got her picked out, and she worked with Mengele in the hospital, which is of course no great pleasure, but at least it saved her life. And because my mother met her there, which is amazing, you know, there were 100,000 of people in all different parts of the camp and from different parts of the world to be there at certain moments. It was just unbelievable. And she did give me some medication, and as I say, I had still some resistance, so I was able to get over that. And so we lived under terrible conditions. My mother got very, very thin, like any mother would do very often. She'd given me a little bit of her bread ration. And one day, we had to have a shower, and we come out, and Mengele stood there, and a selection was taking place. I passed, my mother followed me, and he picked her with about 40 other women of our group to be selected and to be killed. I just ran to my mother still to say goodbye to her. I was beaten with a stick by a couple, and we were separated, and we marched out to a different part of the camp, and those 40 women marched naked out to a death barrack. For 3 months, I didn't know what had happened to my mother. I was convinced she had been gassed. Then, in the meantime, it became winter. The Germans became nervous. The Russians were approaching. We didn't really know that. But the Germans took every day lots and lots of people out of the camp to march into Germany. Again, can you imagine people who are very, very weak after having practically been starved, and in winter with the cold, badly clothed? Practically nobody survived of those marches. Later, after the war, they were called death marches. But what saved us, my mother and me, we were reunited again. Again, that's quite a complicated story. We stayed behind in Auschwitz. You wouldn't think that saved your life, but it did save our life. Next January, it's 70 years that Auschwitz had been liberated by the Russians, and we were there still alive. One day it was very, very quiet, and the Russians came and looked after us. And I went to look then to the men's camp to see if I could find my father and brother. And I came across one person who I'd known in Amsterdam, and it was Otto Frank. We barely recognized each other, but he asked me, are you Eva Geiger, Anna's friend? I said, yes. You are Anna's father? Yes, yes. Have you seen my daughters? Have you seen my wife? And I hadn't seen them. And he had seen my father, and he said, yes, but they've gone with the Germans. Well, we didn't know about death marches at the time, so we had great hope. Well, the fighting in Poland was very, very fierce once the Germans even came back. That's another amazing story, and they took my mother away. But, you know, it was many, many amazing things happened. And the Russians looked after us, and we couldn't get back home. The war wasn't finished, and so they took us eastward. And we saw unbelievable devastation. The Germans had burned down and ruined everything first when they conquered, then when they retrieved, when they pulled back again, and so. But I must say, I have no complaints about the Russian. I'm actually very upset what is happening now. Everything is the fault of the Russian. The Russian people are wonderful people. Mother Russia, they give their life for it. You know, they lost 30 million of their people because the war was really fought mainly on Russian soil. England only fought really after 1944 when the invasion was. But all the years it was fought on Russian soil. And eventually we ended up in Odessa, and there we waited for the end of the war. Otto Frank was still traveling with us. Then another long journey back eventually to Amsterdam, and we got there in June 1945. So from January to June 45 we were traveling all the time. We got to Holland, and you know, till now we had been looked after by all the different countries, had been fed and clothed and all our need, medication, everything we had. And suddenly we were left there and nobody bothered. And then we heard Holland calls it the hunger winter, because the Dutch, the Germans took everything the Dutch produced to Germany to feed their own people, because Holland was freed only at the end of the war. France, Belgium, Italy was already freed much earlier. And so again, listen to that, tens of thousands of people died in their own apartment from starvation. There was literally no food whatsoever. There were no dogs or cats anymore to be found. They all had to be eaten. People ate tulip bulbs, and nevertheless, tens of thousands of people starved. So, and in June, nothing was really working yet. So, you know, we were a nuisance. We had come back, but nobody really could give us anything or help us. So, again, in a nutshell, eventually we were able to get back to our apartment, and there we waited for news of our family. And every day people returned. It was chaotic, you know, people put notices on the railway station, in newspapers, adverts, have you seen this person, were you in this camp, do you know anything of this? If you had a photo, you put photos in.